What's going on, Junkie Nation? Gorgeous George and Goes checking in here. Going to talk to one of the best in the business, Michael Chandler. See you at the top. I love talking to him. Always motivates me to go out and be a better human being. Michael, I wanted to ask you, we met you in Vegas, and then you did a pit stop in San Diego, and then you moved to Florida, although I know you live in Nashville. But you hung on to that work ethic from the University of Missouri, and I was wondering, what did you hang on to from Vegas and SD that you still kind of is molded into your game now?
It's a good question, man. Number one, good to see you guys. And yes, I always say, just for the newer junkie people in the junkie nation, man, you guys were the first big interview that I ever did. Like Randall brought me in. I was like, man, we're at Mandalay Bay or MGM, wherever it was. I was like, man, I'm getting on MMA Junkie right now. Man, I'm about to make it as an MMA fighter. So thank you guys for believing in me since the very beginning. But yeah, as you said, I mean, I left University of Missouri, moved out to Vegas, lived with Randall Alleman, who's been my longtime best friend, manager. And I think the thing that I learned the most in Las Vegas was I was training at Extreme Couture, got thrown into the Lion's Den. Gray Maynard, Mike Pyle, Martin Kampman, Jay Huron, Evan Dunham, probably missing a few. I mean, the who's who of the lightweight and welterweight division, mixing it up, getting beat up by these guys, sparring with them, not even knowing how to spar, not even knowing how to fight, but getting beat up by them. And then also being a body that they could use for wrestling and grappling, and me showing them some wrestling stuff. So I think it was that. It was watching Gray Maynard fight Frankie Edgar for the world title twice while I was there. Watching Martin Kampman in the top 3, watching Jay Huron, watching Mike Pyle, and just all these different guys. And then the guys at my weight class, Evan Dunham, Tyson Griffin, these guys who have fought at the highest level. So I went from the highest level of college wrestling, Division I, top 5, top 10 team at Missouri, to one of the best MMA gyms on the entire planet, with a roster of guys who were living the life. How do you lift? How do you do strength and conditioning? How do you spar? How do you break up your training? How do you go from, because I feel like mixed martial arts, you're a little bit on your own. So you're more of an individual, even though we had a pretty tight team. But because in college wrestling, it was just like, hey, show up, shut up, and listen to the coaches, and they'll tell you what to do. Whereas in mixed martial arts, you're kind of on your own. You're an independent contractor. You're an individual athlete. So I had to learn how to be successful at the next level in mixed martial arts. And luckily, I was rubbing elbows with some of the best guys in the world at the time. So I learned how to be a professional, learned how to break up the training, had a great boxing coach in Gil Martinez, had a great grappling coach in Neil Melanson, learned a lot of stuff from them. And then a couple of years later, moved to San Diego and spent a ton of time around Dominic Cruz, who in my mind is the brightest mind, the greatest mind in mixed martial arts. You can hear it in his analyst work. And spending time with Jeremy Stevens, Miles Jury, and some of these guys, Phil Davis. So I've had some great dudes around me, man. Guys who have fought at the highest level, fought for world titles, won world titles, been at the highest level, huge names, made a ton of money, been in the brightest lights, biggest platforms. Because that's always been my goal. My goal has always been to be the number one guy in the world. So if you want to be the number one guy in the world, you can't do it away from other guys who don't have the same goals as you. So, that's what I would say. And then now, obviously, I have found my home down in South Florida under Henry Hooft and the coaches we have there and the training partners we have there. And now we're just fine tuning some things, and it's worked out pretty well over the last 15 years. And we're going to keep on doing it.
For sure. I asked also because one day when you're inducted in these Hall of Fames in combat sports, right? Who would you like to induct you? I guess who's kind of I guess molded you so much that you would want that person. I mean, it could even be someone outside of MMA, but maybe if there is someone in MMA, I always wondered, from all these people you've met and rubbed elbows with, who would you want to kind of present you?
Man, that's a good question. I have never even really thought about that. I mean, I think if it was outside of mixed martial arts, it would definitely be my father, be my dad. It'd be cool to have him do that. But actually in the sport, I mean, man, I've had so many great dudes in this sport. I mean, even the sport of hand-to-hand combat, Brian Smith, my head coach at Mizzou, was probably the man who molded me the most going into mixed martial arts for sure. But then in mixed martial arts, obviously it could be recency bias because I currently train with him, but Henry Hooft, you're around a lot of coaches, you're around a lot of leaders. Obviously, a guy like me who I've trained all across the world, all around the country, been to 4 or 5 different gyms and had long stints there. This is the longest I've been at a gym and the longest I've trained under one coach. Henry Hooft, great coach, great striking coach. The punches and knees and kicks and elbows and striking techniques, his Hooft kickboxing, that's part of it. But the man he is as a leader, the constant, steadfast and immovable leader and presence that he is as a human being, a guy who I love more as a man, as a human being than I do as a coach. I think it would definitely be him. He'll never know how much he means to me, and he'll never truly know how high in high regard I see him, truly thinking that my career has been on an upward trajectory since I started training with him. I moved to South Florida, or I moved my training camp to South Florida, I think 8 years ago. So the fights that we've been through, the ups and the downs, the wins and the losses, winning titles, losing titles, fighting for titles, man, we've been through a lot of it. And he's just been so constant the entire time. And consistency in a human being, in a leader, is what you want. The best qualities of a leader and leadership isn't just what you know, isn't just the techniques that you can show, the game plans and all of the different things that we think about in mixed martial arts. It's who you are as a person, and would I take a bullet for you, and am I proud to ride into battle with you? So every time I get to walk into an arena toward an octagon with Henry Hooft by my side, behind me, that presence, his presence inside of the fight and in the corner, it would definitely be him. It would be an honor to have him induct me into the Hall of Fame.
I like that. It does look like Henry would take a bullet for you and you would take one for him. I guess a lot of this started from, I've been watching Dark Side on Vice, Dark Side of MMA. Have you heard of that series?
No, I just saw something posted up on Twitter or something the other day. I need to watch it.
It's good. It's really good. One of the latest ones that I saw was Diego Sanchez. He started at Jackson's. He was an all-state wrestler. Then he moved to San Diego, and I remember with the Hibeto brothers. And then he got that spell with that coach Joshua Fabia. But seeing Greg Jackson and him kind of reconnect, Jackson saying, "Hey, I'd even like you here." And then I heard Stevens over the weekend say, former teammate of yours, he mentioned Coach Adrian. And I think you had done some work with Coach Adrian. He just said, man, he goes, he taught me some basics in boxing that are still with me or whatever. And I thought I remember, you with him. And I remember you always spoke highly of Gil Martinez as well. So that's kind of why I was wondering, these athletes, there must be something that always stays with you at every pit stop, with every coach. It could be words, it could be a combo, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe someone that just sat on a hospital bed next to you, while everyone else kept partying or whatever. You know what I'm saying? There's always something that stays with you as a man.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because, it's funny, we're these big tough guys and we play, tough guys on TV like Superman and people think we're larger than life and we're these, we're impenetrable, right? We're bulletproof because we're fighters, but we're just human beings, man. And God created us for community and connection and relationship. And for me, that's always been the most important thing. I don't really care what you know unless I know that you care. And I've had some great, great coaches around me. Adrian was another one. And as Jeremy said, Adrian would never be the guy who, would necessarily be the highest level coach because of all of his crazy techniques and perfect details, but he was brilliant with the basics and he was a good human being, a good human being, a guy that I still keep up with to this point. Gil Martinez as well. We talk often. We stay in contact. I mean, these are guys that just because I moved on to another gym doesn't mean that I'm not still grateful for you. If there was a Hall of Fame ceremony, if there was a retirement party, if there was something, all of those people would be invited because I'm not who I am today. I am who I am today in the last couple training camps, the last couple years because of Henry Hooft and his coaching. But I still have a foundation that was built by Gil Martinez and Neil Melanson, and then Eric Del Fierro and Adrian Melendrez Aaron Simpson in Arizona, and a bunch of these different coaches. And it's and even before that, Brian Smith at Mizzou and Bob and Ron Wilhelm at Northwest High School. It's yeah, man, it's beautiful. And when you've been doing it for this long, you look back and say, man, I've had some really great people. I'm actually currently writing a book that will be coming out this year. So I'm currently writing that and kind of going over all the different stories, the high school days, the college days, the early Bellator days, the late Bellator days, the early UFC days, the current UFC days. And it's been kind of a walk down memory lane, and you really become even more grateful for the path that I have had, the path that I have taken, and the people that have been involved.
I'm going to turn it over to Goes, but just real quick, do you know when the book will be out?
I don't. We are currently about halfway through it right now, and it's a lot of work, especially when you care as much as I do. I mean, I want to get it right. It's not just my story; it's my story plus all the principles that I have learned along the way. You know, going 688 days without winning a fight. After I lost my first fight to Eddie Alvarez and lost the subsequent 2 fights after that, the pain and the embarrassment and the just the downright depression I was in, to be able to pull myself out of that, come back, win the world title, and then go to the UFC and all the different ups and downs. I mean, there's been so many principles and that I've learned through these different seasons that I want to impart on young men, especially young athletes. And it'll be sometime this year. And it'd be cool if it was by the time my next fight or the fight after.
In time for Christmas.
Yeah.
Let us know. We'd love to promote it. All right, Goes. What do you have for Iron Michael Chandler?
Well, I have a bit of advice and a question. I'm going to start with the advice. Whatever that book is titled, make sure it says Volume 1, because I feel like there's a lot left in this Michael Chandler story.
I like
and
that.
Just in MMA alone, that's not even talking about all the other things you do outside of mixed martial arts. But within mixed martial arts, it seems like right now we're in a period where you need a fight, and it seems like there's a ton of dance partners, and a lot of them actually make sense. If we were to ask you, Michael, like, what is your best case scenario? What's on your wish list? What would be your response?
It's a good question. I mean, I've had some time to think about it, obviously. As of November 15th, the path was beat Charles Oliveira, become the number 1 contender. If Islam is ready, I'll fight him. If he's not, maybe Connor's still around. If he's not, Max Holloway for the BMF belt. Obviously, I squandered all of that by losing the last fight. So we've had to recalibrate and look at the suitors. What's a big fight? What's a fun fight? What's a fight that's going to get the juices flowing? Obviously, a week or 2 ago, whatever it was, you had Moicano fighting Islam for the title because Arman pulls out of the fight. Arman's a possibility because it said UFC, or Dana said that he's going to have to build himself back, at least get one more fight. Is Charles Oliveira the number 1 contender? Does Charles Oliveira fight for the title next? I don't know. Obviously, he wouldn't be my next opponent. People have thrown out Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett's a fun fight. I think comparatively, the guys that I have fought, the murderers row I have fought since coming into the UFC, I welcome that fight. It's a big fight. It's a fun fight. I'm a fan of Paddy. I like the way he does things. I like his brand. He's one of the good ones in the sport. I don't need to hate somebody to want to separate them from consciousness, because that is my goal if I was to fight him, even if I would also pick him up off the canvas and say, hey, dust yourself off. You still got a bright future. Moicano, obviously Beneil Dariush pulling out or getting his opponent, I guess, taken in the last fight. There's a lot of different names out there, man. The UFC lightweight division is and always has been one of the most exciting, one of the most deep and stacked divisions. And of course, we have to mention Connor, so people can make fun of me and keep poking fun at me, but we'll see if he can get his house in order. As of late, it doesn't necessarily look like it. So that's always a possibility sometime in the next year. But a lot of options, a lot of fun options, a lot of exciting options. But I still believe I'm destined for UFC gold. I just need to put a couple wins together.
One of those names that you brought up for me stands out a little bit more. I actually kind of like that Paddy Pimblett matchup. And when I see him, I was going to ask you, do you ever look at him and his game and kind of see a little bit of yourself at some point in your career?
Yeah. I mean, I think he's got all the tools. He does. I don't think he's as explosive as I am when it comes to knockout power and being able to finish a fight quick, but he can finish a fight quickly on the ground, as we saw in the Bobby Green fight. but yeah, man, I think he's one of the good ones, as I said, it doesn't stop me from, if we were to compete against each other, I'm coming for blood. But with that being said, he's one of the good ones. It looks like, he's dedicated to the sport. I'd like to see him not get so out of weight in between training camps. I've told him before in the past, hey, that ain't gonna fly well for longevity. So keep it buttoned up a little bit more. But yeah, I think I see similarities. He's fun. He enjoys what he does. He loves the sport. He loves to compete. I've always had that. I think have a little bit more of a killer instinct. The guy that you guys know outside of the octagon is a pretty non-confrontational, pretty fun, pretty happy, pretty positive guy. But inside of the confines of competition, when that octagon door closes, I want to do some severe damage. I don't really see that in him necessarily, but he's got the ability to finish fights, and he has finished fights. So if that is the next fight, we'll see how it plays out. If that is, then I welcome it with open arms. We'll see where the cards fall.
Do you feel like between Tsarukyan and Pimblett, does one get you further than the other? Because Tsarukyan's higher up in the rankings. Pimblett seems to just carry so much weight, and I feel like a lot of people would put eyes on that fight. Does either one do a little bit more for you, do you think?
Man, it's a great question because, I think I'm 50-50 on it. Obviously, the competitor in me is what gets me closest to the title shot. What gets me further in the rankings? Obviously, I would love to fight Arman, beat Arman, and take Arman's ranking, especially since he was just the prior number one contender and still considered the number one contender at this point. But when you talk about a guy like Patty, it's about eyeballs. It's about big fights. I've said it numerous times. When you get into the sport of mixed martial arts, you want a couple things, a couple boxes that need to be checked. You want the biggest fights, the brightest lights, the most amount of money because we are prize fighters, and the biggest names and the biggest competition. I think Arman's a little bit more competition, higher up in the rankings, but Patty brings a level of intrigue, a level of fun, a level of, as you said, weight to a matchup. And in my mind, you got one of the biggest names in the sport, definitely one of the biggest names in the UK and Europe for sure. People will travel across the pond to come to this fight. If the fight does happen, lined up against the most entertaining, the most exciting, the most violent guy in the division. So it's a sellable fight. It's a fight that holds weight. It's co-main event, main event worthy type of fight. And we'll see how the talks are going behind the scenes.
You always seem like a guy that's in the gym and ready to go. But you do have a lot of things going on outside of mixed martial arts all the time. So how soon do you think you could get something going?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of PT and rehab the last couple months. Banged up the lower body a little bit. Excuse me. And so I've been working on that. I definitely am able to come back, this summer, or in the middle of the summer. International Fight Week sounds like a great target to hit, whatever that is, June or July. So big fight, big card. Obviously, I'm one of the guys I got to be put on the big card these days. So whatever big pay-per-view they got coming up in May, June, July, I think that gives me a good time. I got a baby being born, little baby girl being born in March 31st, which I won't necessarily make my decision based upon that. I'm a professional fighter and daddy's got to work, but the timing definitely works out for getting healthy, getting my feet back underneath me for that kind of May, June, July timeframe.
Congratulations on that, by the way. Last one from me. I want to ask you a question about wrestling. And it maybe even goes back a little bit to what George was talking about. But we've been hearing so much about Islam Makhachev, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and this Dagestani wrestling and how it's dominating in mixed martial arts, not just in the UFC, but across other organizations as well. But when you look at like the Olympic wrestling, when you just look at different competitions, you see a lot of countries dominating. What is it about their style in mixed martial arts? And do you think the US or even some of these other countries, are they going to be starting to catch up? Do they take it a little bit? Like, does it kind of piss them off when they hear that sort of stuff? Because you've been around those types of circles.
I have, man. And I think the effectiveness of their wrestling lies solely in their tenacity. I think it's less physical, The physical, obviously, it looks physical to you and me and the onlooker when we watch it, right? It's grabbing the wrist, it's pressure here, it's head pressure there, it's a smothering type of style, but it's not even the physicality that does the damage, that has the effectiveness. It's the tenacity and their willingness to continue to wrestle and their belief in their wrestling. When you watched Khabib, you could pick him apart with a fine tooth comb and you could say that shot wasn't good, didn't bring his hips in there, didn't cut the corner the right way there. He made a lot of mistakes in wrestling, yet it all still worked. His takedowns never got stopped. Nobody was ever able to get out from underneath of him. And Islam's very similar. But it lies solely in the tenacity and their belief in their wrestling. This is our style. I'm going to pick you up and put you down. I'm going to take you down. And when I take you down, I'm going to do a few very simple techniques with a lot of pressure. And I believe that I'm going to hold you down and you are going to believe that you can't get up. Therefore, you won't get up. So I think it has a lot more to do with the mentality of the wrestling than it does the actual wrestling techniques. Plus, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I was lined up to fight against Islam, or anybody is lined up to fight against Islam, the number one goal is, okay, let's work on the wrestling. Don't get taken down. Don't get held down. And sometimes in mixed martial arts and in any area of life, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to focus on what not to do and what not to have happen, that ultimately it ends up happening, right? And I think sometimes that happens. Similar to the Conor McGregor, when he was in his heyday, he would get people so out of their own mind and so bewildered by the trash talk and the hype of the fight that the guys were beat before they even stepped inside of the octagon, because he had either chipped away at their self-confidence and the self-image, or they had hyped the fight up so much that they crumbled in the moment. Similar when you're talking about fighting Khabib, Islam, the Nurmagomedov, some of these Dagestani guys, people are so afraid of the wrestling that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then the effectiveness lies in the tenacity, their belief that, hey, I'm going to take you down. It's not if, it's when. And then when I do take you down, I'm going to hold you down and you will not be able to get up.
Do you still have any nostalgia towards Bellator? A lot of fighters are saying, hey, Bellator, thanks for the good memories, because obviously it sounds like their last show may have just taken place. It was supposed to be a Bellator Champions Series, and then it was rebranded to PFL, and I was just wondering if like that part of your career was just something where, you wanted to give a shout out to, or are you so focused on the UFC that that's just in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been a guy I'm focused on the here and now. So I'm focused on the UFC and who's my next opponent in the UFC. But just as I just explained to you guys earlier about from the high school wrestling coaches all the way through college and then into mixed martial arts at Extreme Couture in San Diego and Arizona, Bellator, I am not who I am today without my run in Bellator, and Bellator didn't make it as far as they would have without me and my fights and my contribution. I think it was a good symbiotic win-win situation relationship. And I hold a little nostalgia to it, but I think more than anything, I don't get a great feeling when I think about Bellator. I know the last couple of years I was there, I felt like I was underperforming, I was underutilized, and I was underseen while doing all the hard work. I was working harder than everybody else in the UFC, working longer hours, more disciplined than everybody in the UFC, living the championship lifestyle, yet I was outside of the UFC, so therefore I didn't get the credit for it. Maybe that's a little chip on my shoulder. Maybe it's a little ego, a little pride. I'm willing to admit that. But I don't necessarily have any bad feelings about Bellator, but it's not something that I really think about, and I didn't really have any feelings one way or another. I think I wasn't surprised whenever I saw that Bellator was going to be no more. I think the writing was on the wall when PFL acquired them, that PFL was going to acquire their fighters, or the ones that they wanted at least, and then they were going to continue to operate under the PFL brand. So yeah, I wish them the best. All the way from the Bjorn Rebney days to the Scott Coker days, the Spike days, the MTV2 days. My first fight against Eddie Alvarez was on MTV2. It's got more views on YouTube right now than it did probably that night in the actual fight night for sure. But yeah, man, it was a part of my journey, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my run in Bellator. And here we are now, bigger and better.
Would you want to do bare knuckle once before you retire from combat sports?
Absolutely not. I think I've proven that I'm a tough guy. I think I could say absolutely not without risking people saying this guy's soft. I don't think I need to go fight bare knuckle to prove how tough I am. Just go type my name in on YouTube or on UFC Fight Pass, and you can see that I'm no softy. But no, I think there's a certain brand of guy that goes there while you're still in your prime and able to compete at the highest level in mixed martial arts. And I'm not one of those guys. So I think when I will hang up the gloves for the last time at some point under the UFC and never fight again. That will be the goal. And I'll probably leave before people want me to leave for sure. And but right now, man, we're focused on the next fight, and we'll see what it is. But I'm a fan of bare knuckle. I'm a fan of watching it. My wife coincidentally, like, we've bought a couple of the pay-per-views, watched them ever since the very beginning of BKFC. And I want to go see a fight in person because watching dudes fight with no gloves on would be very interesting cage side.
You're right. No one will ever question your toughness. I mean, your fights are barn burners every single time for sure. Is it more about like the cuts, or is it like I guess, yeah, specifically, is it too carnal, or I don't know, I mean, I think maybe you've talked about in the past you'd like to do stuff in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Is it like that, or
No, I think it's more because I don't think, I could be wrong. I guess I haven't really thought about it too much, but I mean, does the padding of a 4-ounce glove really have that much hindrance of impact than a bare knuckle? I don't know. Do you get cut more? Yeah, of course, because it's bones cracking up against bones. You're going to get more cuts, but do you take more head damage? I don't know. I think the sport we engage in mixed martial arts is just as brutal and just as dangerous for long-term damage. I think it's more just where I'm at right now. I mean, the stage that I'm at, I've built my career up to where I'm at in the UFC, which is the biggest fight promotion on the planet times 1,000. And when you're one of the top guys, one of the biggest names, one of the biggest earners, one of the biggest, names who puts butts in seats on a pay-per-view on any given Saturday night, you're in a good position where you don't really need to think about any kind of backup plan as a fighter. As a fan, it's fun to watch. And I will watch it. And, it's very interesting watching Connor out there and doing his thing, talking about he wants to fight bare knuckle. And you got the Logan Paul brothers, or Logan Paul, Jake Paul, him talking about fighting them. And they're like, you can't even do your first job, let alone a side job. And Connor can't even fight in the UFC, let alone BKFC. You're under contract with the UFC. Fight your contract out. Fight me if you can, before you want to talk about fighting bare knuckle. It's all just promotion, and it's fun though. It's fun. It's a little bit of a circus. But I would be there. I think Dave Feldman is a pretty impressive guy. I've been around him once or twice, and seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and they're doing something pretty cool over there. So I have no interest in fighting there, but I'll watch as a fan.
Can't wait for the next fight booking. International Fight Week does sound pretty good. I thought maybe Miami in April, but I guess you're saying that rehab, and then your daughter's going to be born, so you might need a little bit of time right after that.
Yeah.
So July does sound like pretty good timing.
Yeah.
And
April, I think, was on the table for a second. I just needed to see how these couple little injuries were going. I heal like a Wolverine though, so I'm doing good. I'm progressing, and everything's good.
You definitely do, man. You definitely do, and you definitely do put butts in seats. What an incredible ride that you've had here in the UFC in terms of that popularity and how people get excited for your fights. That's amazing. But it's because you put yourself out there, and like, you keep us on the edge of the seat. That's for sure.
I'm not afraid of a violent conflict inside the confines of competition. That is for darn sure. So, yeah, I love what I do, man.
Thank you as always for the time. Again, congrats on the upcoming addition to your family. You have a new home, the tequila brand. Hopefully it keeps growing, and hopefully a few bottles make their way out here to Las Vegas. A couple Mexican guys can put it to use. Anyway, take care, Michael. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
You got it, man. And as always, man, thank you guys, like I said, for believing in me ever since back in the day. And here we are 15 years later. I appreciate you guys.
Anytime, man.
Appreciate you.